that's something that so many of us do, is we buy all this crap that we don't actually need, and then we pay for it for the rest of our lives.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yanis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to talk about either a movie of their choice, something they grew up with, something they have a personal connection to, or just a really cool movie. And that this movie, I think, in this sense, in this episode, kind of hits possibly several of those. We'll see. So I'm pleased to welcome back to the show Ashley Grant. Welcome back to the show. Excuse me, the famous Ashley Grant.
Woo, what's up? I'm happy to be here. I can't wait.
So can you tell people listening and who didn't listen to our confidence episode from, what was that, January? Jeez, it's been a while. Who you are and what you're up to and what your whole deal is.
Well, I am a blogger, and I also do a lot of ghost blogging for small businesses. So that's kind of just what I do. My day job is the ghost blogging, and then by night I try to get internet famous.
Aren't we all trying to get internet famous these days? I mean,
well, I said internet famous, but not Kardashian famous.
Yeah, no,
that's a different kind of famous by night.
No, yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So you, when we talked about this movie, I guess on the last episode, and Kai had actually mentioned about it. So this film, without mentioning the name of the movie, which we're going to do in a few minutes, it came out in 1999. So you and I were just talking about right before I officially started the episode about how 1999, this film included, was really, there was a whole lot of like anti-establishment films out there. We talked briefly about The Matrix and Office Space and things like that. So, you and I were around in 1999. Any sense what the hell was going on in 1999 that everybody was like over it at that point?
Honestly, I don't even know. I just know that I was a freshman in high school just trying to get by. So I guess our parents were just really pissed off.
Yeah, and this one is probably, I mean, even American Beauty, too, which won Best Picture for the 1999 cinema year. It's just an overarching message of breaking out of the confines of daily life and capitalism and advertising and just, breaking out of being a consumer and kind of living your life to the fullest, which is, in theory, a message I can get behind. I think, this movie specifically goes really off the deep end with it. So I guess, we can kind of just transition into talking about this movie. Well, why did you pick Fight Club as the movie that you wanted to talk about? And then we can kind of
that's the movie we're talking about. I chose this movie because I have watched it more times than is probably normal for a human. It really spoke to me. I quote that movie probably more than any movie I quote. It's one of those flicks that you either love it or you hate it. And I absolutely loved it. It like I said, it spoke to me. It really made me think about things from a different perspective. I just love it. That's the best way I can describe it. I don't know if you're ready to jump into why I love it, but I absolutely love this film. I would watch it. If it's on, I'm watching it. That's just all there is to it. I love that movie.
Yeah. Normally, before we get into the movie, I do a lot of how we know each other thing, but I feel like people who listen to the other episode already know now who you are. We've known each other since forever. We used to work at AMC Theaters a million years ago, and then now we're both freelance writers, kind of doing ghostwriting and miscellaneous other things. So this was kind of a natural extension of your last appearance on the episode, and it's a very different kind of movie than Confidence, but it still has not. Yeah, I was gonna say it still has kind of a similar stylistic vibe to it. What do you think it is about these two movies in particular that draws you to them, and what do you think they have in common?
Well, I think, with Confidence, the thing that I liked so much about it was that the characters were confident. They were sure of themselves. They knew what they were doing. And I think that's what I love so much about Fight Club as well is, the character is coming into his own. And even though he does it in a very strange way, he's still figuring out who the hell he is and what he's doing with his life. And it's just... as you're watching it and you're going through the progression of how he comes to be and realize who he is, you just gotta watch it, man.
No, and that's a theme that I feel like most people can relate to. I mean, now I just turned, as of this recording, I turned 36 yesterday. So I still feel like I'm married with a kid, and I'm still kind of like, what the hell? What am I doing here? What's my point? What's my purpose? I'm trying to figure that out. And part of it is doing this podcast. So that's good. I guess I nailed part of it down a little bit, but I feel like that's a perpetual journey that everyone is on. And when you're a kid, you just assume, oh, I'll have it figured out when I'm 25 or when I'm 30 or whatever. When I settle down, I'll be like, I got everything under control. And then the older you get, the more you realize, oh, you just never feel like you have things figured out, apparently. At least most people don't.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we've been talking about like as we're growing up, because one of my favorite quotes in the movie is, we've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't, and we're slowly learning that fact, and we're very, very pissed off. Mm-hmm. And that's why I was saying, like, I wonder, were our parents and the generation before us, were they all the ones that were so pissed off that they created these types of flicks because they wanted to talk about how, the American dream is bull and they wanted you to know the truth?
Yeah. I mean, when this movie came out, we were in high school, we were teenagers. So this wasn't really aimed at us. This was definitely resonating more with our parents' generation. So, and it's funny to hear Brad Pitt say, oh, we're all want to be movie gods, well, except we're not. And I'm like, but you're Brad Pitt. So it's ironic that you're saying that.
Yeah. Because he is a movie god.
That's what I'm saying.
Let's face it.
And we'll talk more about what this film did maybe for his career and his image and things like that in a second. But yeah, it's definitely a movie that I think I actually will talk about, when I first watched it and stuff in a minute, but I think definitely resonates more with me now than it did when it came out or whenever I first saw it. And it's a complicated experience watching this movie for me. I haven't revisited it as much as you have, so I feel like now we're talking about our experience with the movie, so we should just kind of transition into, obviously this episode we're going to be talking about Fight Club, directed by David Fincher, so let's listen to a little bit of the trailer right now.
Like many of you, I was stuck. You want me to deprioritize my current reports until you advise of a status upgrade?
Make these your primary action items.
I couldn't sleep.
No, you can't die from insomnia.
I'd flip through catalogs and wonder, what kind of dining set defines me as a person? This is your life, and it's ending 1 minute at a time. I prayed for a different life.
Soap. I make and I sell soap.
And this is how I met Tyler Durden.
Come on, hit me before I lose my nerve. Ow! You hit me in the ear!
It was on the tip of everyone's tongue.
Can I be next?
We just gave it a name.
Gentlemen, welcome to Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is...
Wow, nice.
You do not talk about Fight Club.
Is that your blood?
Some of it, yeah. After Fight Club, we all started seeing things differently.
You're gonna have to keep me up all night.
And she ruined everything.
You're not into her, are you?
No, God, not at all.
We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't.
He had a plan. To what purpose? In Tyler we trusted.
That was a little bit of the trailer for Fight Club, directed by David Fincher. So as I was saying, I first saw this movie, I don't even remember, or maybe early 2000s. Like, I did not see it when it first came out. It wasn't necessarily on my radar. I was a kind of a budding cinephile at that point. When did you first see it, and how has your relationship with Fight Club developed over the years?
I'm pretty confident that the first time I saw it was in college, because this is the type of movie that I would not have been allowed to have watched whenever I was a kid.
Right.
These were the graphics in it, the verbiage in it, the bad language, that would not have been allowed in my household. So I definitely didn't see it till college, and I was really grateful that I saw it whenever I first got to college, and I'll tell you why. at that time, it seemed like everyone around me was trying so hard to, get the next expensive bag or go to the next exclusive club. And there was a lot of money being spent that you could tell people didn't have. I mean, I remember, I went to USF, and I know you did too, but University of South Florida, go Bulls. I remember one of my first experiences on campus was I was going to get a Subway sandwich, and outside of the Subway was a guy who was giving away free pizza in exchange for you signing up for a credit card. And you have all these students who are broke as a joke, but they're all trying to live these rock star lifestyles. So they're going up and they're getting this free slice of pizza in exchange for a credit card. And it was just very eye-opening to, if you head down a certain path, you're going to start doing exactly what the character Tyler Durden says in the movie, and letting the things you own you.
Yeah, I wrote that down too, that quote. That's one of the best ones.
Oh my God. That's the quote. Oh my God. I love that quote so much. And I try to remember it anytime I start buying, frivolous stuff that I don't actually need in my apartment. And so that's why I was so glad that I did find it whenever I got to college, and I just kept watching it over the years. Same reason that I would watch Office Space and Matrix is, you get addicted to learning more about how not to be a sheep.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And, it's funny because me being a student of pop culture, like a lot of that, like you're bombarded with that kind of thing. Every time I go on my phone on Facebook, it's like, to a certain extent, following entertainment kind of falls down that rabbit hole too, because you're obsessing over little details of things, and you're just kind of too plugged in to really see it's Ferris Bueller thing. It's if you don't stop and look around once in a while, you'll miss it. That kind of mindset. And I feel like Fight Club definitely touches on that a lot. And at the time when I saw it, and we'll get to this in a second here, as I felt it was it's obviously a very dark film, but I felt like it was more more depressing than anything else. Do you feel like this movie in a way is kind of inspirational, or do you feel like it has the opposite effect?
I think it depends on the mood you're in when you watch it.
Right.
No, I really do, because
that's true. That's definitely
because the other night, whenever I was watching it again for the first time in just a couple of weeks, I was in a really good mood, and so watching it, I was like, "Oh my God, that part's hilarious!" That part's hilarious. But I can definitely see how if you're watching it at a time whenever you're in a bad mood, you're like, "Oh my God, I hate the world. Everyone needs to die. I should just be a loner." It's just it definitely depends on the mood at which you're taking it in.
It also reminded me a little bit too, and I think the Helena Bonham Carter factor is part of this. It reminds me that's how I feel about the Sweeney Todd movie that she was in with Johnny Depp, which I really love. But it also has everybody sucks, we all deserve to die. There's either the people that step on everyone else to get where they want to be, or there's the people, us being stepped on, that it's like either way, let's just check out because none of this is worth it. And so it has a very extremely cynical vibe to it, which this movie also has too. And I think it's true. It is kind of a litmus test. If you're coming to it with an element of hope, then that you're living your life differently, that you can make changes and feel more fulfilled with your lifestyle and with your buying habits. And this movie obviously gets more into consumerism than anything else in a lot of ways. Then it almost reaffirms that lifestyle. But if you look at it from the other direction, you're like, oh man, we're all doomed. We're just like stuck in this. Maybe we should just blow everything up. Everything's a mess. So let's just burn it all down, and everybody could be economically. What does she say? Economically equivalent. Economic equilibrium. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does depend very much on the way that you view it. But it's crazy because this movie, when it came out in 1989, it came out after Seven and after The Game from David Fincher. The Game, which was a financial disappointment. This only made $37 million domestically and $100 worldwide, which is not great considering it cost $63. But yet it's emerged as a cult film, probably for a lot of the reasons of why you said you keep revisiting it. And people that are like us that saw it maybe in high school or college and didn't really get it, but then over the years were like, oh man, Tyler Durden speaking truth. It's become insanely culturally relevant.
Especially considering the fact that we're in an age right now. I mean, you see it every day in the media where there's constant reports of the fact that people our age, we can't get houses, we can't get car loans, we can't even get jobs. And, of course we're going to want, to fight against the system because the system screwed us. And so that's why this movie is still becoming so culturally relevant, because everything that's in it is everything we're feeling right now. I mean, whenever we're saying, you're not your job, you're not how much money you have in the bank. Well, of course not. What we'd rather do, instead of having all this crap that we don't need, is we want experiences. We want human connection. We want to feel like we matter and like the world gives a damn about us. And I just think that that's why I've started loving this movie more than I ever have as I'm getting older, because it really speaks to the fact that you don't want to collect stuff anymore. You don't want to collect more credit card debt. You don't want to collect more consumer debt of any kind. What you want is to stand up and be on your own. And I mean, I understand that, yes, no man is an island, but at the same time, you can at least build something that matters. And I just love the movie. Well, Tyler, I'm starting to go on a rant.
That's all good. No, well, that's the point of having the guest pick, mostly for the most part, pick the movie, because then you get that kind of passion. You're like, oh, I just love this movie. So like, I just recorded recently an episode of the podcast where I was talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit to my mom, which is a movie I grew up with. I still have my Roger Rabbit doll from when I was like 5. And it was just basically an hour of me going, oh, it's so awesome. I just love it so much. Basically the exact same kind of thing you're doing. So that's awesome. That's exactly what we want on here.
I hope we can still be friends. I've never seen that movie.
Oh, so you should see that movie. At least you should at least see it once. That makes me sad. But Tyler says in the movie, he says, we're working jobs we hate to buy things we don't need, basically. And, I know, in recent years, at least, I know you've come to embrace more and more kind of the digital nomad lifestyle, and that's part of that is having a more minimalist approach to stuff. So I'm not surprised that this movie resonates with you so closely. And both of us are freelance writers. Both of us are all about not being stuck in a cubicle 40 hours a week and having a little more freedom and flexibility to decide our own life and how we spend this time that we have on this earth. And he says in the movie, this is your life and it's ending 1 minute at a time. And so many people are just like, yeah, but I gotta get to work and then clock out and then hopefully, bust my ass and maybe get somewhere and move ahead, but probably not. And just move on to the next thing. So can you talk about a little bit about how your career path sort of parallels this movie?
Oh man. Like I said, I'm pretty sure the first time I saw this movie was when I first got to college. And when I was first in college, I changed my major several times. The first degree I was headed towards was marketing and economics. And I was absolutely convinced I was going to own my own business and make a bunch of money. And then I had this like crisis of conscience where I was like, no, I need to do something to give back. And I was convinced I needed to be a teacher. So I changed my major to education and I, went gung ho about it. I was going to be a high school studies teacher, social studies teacher, and all this stuff. But then as I started like really thinking about what I wanted to be when I grow up, which I still haven't done.
Same.
It became pretty clear to me that I don't do well with authority. I don't do well with people telling me what to do. I don't do well with, requirements like you have to be clocked in by 9 a.m. And if you're not clocked in by 9 a.m., then we're going to write you up. And if you do it again, then you're going to get a docked a day's pay. And if you do it again, then we're going to fire you. And, it just became like a constant exhibit of you have to follow the rules. And if you don't follow the rules, then there's going to be consequences. And finally, one day I was just like, listen, I don't want to follow anybody's rules except for my own. And next thing I knew, I was in Dr. Wilbur's intro to mass comm class, and he's talking about media. And he had this guy come in who was a freelance writer. And as he introduced this guy to us, he was explaining what he did and how, he had to get fired 8 times before he could be unemployed, because that's the life of a freelancer. You work for several people. You don't owe anybody anything. You don't, you are your own person, and yeah, you make money, but you're not, tied to anything. And I was like, that's what I want. And that's when I changed my major one last time. And I graduated with journalism, convinced that I was not going to work for any one company ever. I wanted to make sure that I was the only person I had to answer to. And goodness, this is the 13th year that I'll be a freelancer.
Wow. Yeah. the way that the job market and the workforce in this country is set up is really weird because it just assumes that everybody runs on the exact same speed, on the exact same schedule. And that, to me, that's just a constant source of anxiety. It's like maybe my body and my personality, I'm not built to wake up at like 7 o'clock to sit in traffic for an hour. I mean, some people are legitimately happy with their career path and with doing that. But I feel like a lot of people, like the character in the movie, are just kind of slipped into complacency that over time turns into something else. And that's why I think that the ultimate conflict in this film, being basically man versus himself, is so resonant because everybody feels that sense of regret, that sense of, questioning their place in this world. And, half the movies that came out in 1999 apparently tackled that topic pretty much head on. And the fact that this film is basically about one man's struggle internally and how it just gives birth to something that he completely loses control of by the end, I think is really interesting. So obviously this movie is 20 years old, so we're going to get into spoilers and everything. So I guess we should just straight up, hit it early on. This is obviously one of the best movie twists of all time, right? I mean,
absolutely.
And I think we both I think I knew about the twist when I watched it, but I forgot about it. Like I'd heard about it and then I didn't, it wasn't in my head. So when it happened at the end, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. This is the movie where that happens. What was your relationship with the twist of the film? Did you know about it when you watched it for the first time or
the very first time I had no idea. I had no idea.
That's awesome.
And so it was just like, wait a minute, what just happened? And that's when I was like, all right, I need to watch this one more time. Like, I think I watched it a second time right after I watched it the first time because I was just like, did I see what I think I just saw? And I loved it. I thought it was a great plot twist. I thought it was fantastic. And of course, then, you go back and you watch it again and you're just like, wow, everything that leads up to it. There's all these little hidden Easter eggs throughout the whole movie where you're like, This is what it's telling me. This is awesome.
And when I first saw it, in 2000 and whatever that was, like I said, the movie hit me in such a dark way that I was like, I don't know how often I want to rewatch this, but yet it's become such a classic and so praised. And it's like number 10, I think, on IMDb's top 250 movies of all time as rated by users and such. And so I bought it on Blu-ray, at a Black Friday sale or whatever. I was like, sure, okay, come on. And I had the Blu-ray sitting on my shelf for who knows how many years and wrapped and everything. And we were doing this episode. I was like, I guess I should open this and I got to rewatch it because clearly I don't remember it. So this was my first time actually going back and watching it, knowing the twist and picking up on all those little things. I knew that I'd heard about some of them. The flashes of Tyler, like there's a scene early on when he's in the office where he's like one frame, like he's like there and gone. And it's kind of a reference. A lot of things in this movie too are references to the actual movie itself, because there's a whole sequence where Tyler is splicing in a shot of a porn film into like a family movie because he works as a projectionist, which they again flash at the very end of the movie. Like the very last shot of the movie, like when it cuts to credits, it's like, and then you see like that pornographic image of a man's crotch or something, and it's spliced into the movie, like sort of subliminally, I guess. Which of do you have any particular hints or like Easter eggs regarding that you actually that you like? Like, which are your favorites?
Well, I can honestly tell you that I didn't see them the first time I watched them. It wasn't until the second time I saw the flick that I was like, oh my God, that's why that's there. That's why that blip is there. And because you mentioned the fact that he's a movie projectionist in the beginning of it, of course, it brought me back to when you and I worked at the movie theater together, because all I could think was, I wonder if any of our projectionists ever did something that naughty. But because why else would you become a projectionist? No, right. I'm just kidding. That's completely wrong. And I feel really bad about it. And I take it back. No, I don't. So, but what was the question again?
Like, what did are there any specific little hints that you picked up on that maybe you didn't notice before, or that you maybe would single out as some of your favorites that were basically that? For example, I really like the fact that it's made a big deal of, not really made that big a deal of, but it's mentioned early in the film that Tyler asks the narrator, who by the way doesn't have a name. So I guess, are we to assume that his actual birth, like his actual name on his driver's license and stuff, is Tyler Durden, and that's why we never hear Edward Norton's character say his own name? I'm assuming that's what it is.
I'm not sure because we've never heard his actual name. I mean, because even Marla makes fun of that when she's like, "Are you Cornelius or are
Rupert
you any of the other stupid Rupert or any of the other stupid names you give every night?" And it's, we never do hear his real name. So yeah, who knows what's on his license?
I think that's also indicative of the fact that he doesn't know himself. So in a way, he doesn't have a name in this film. And a lot of things in here could be read as very symbolic, that he's trying to figure out who he is. So he's just, all right, today I'll be Rupert. Today I'm, Cornelius. Today I'm, I don't know, I'll create this new, I'll be Tyler now from now on. And that's my persona. And early in the film, they mentioned that Tyler asks him if he wants a cigarette, and he's like, no, I don't smoke. And then later on, you just casually see him lighting up. Little things like that you can tell that blur the lines between is he Tyler? Is he Brad Pitt now? Is he Edward Norton? Like, what's the dynamic there? So I think that's really cool, that the way that it works in a lot of senses, like something like, The Sixth Sense, in that you go back and you see the way that everything was shown very strategically and like cut very strategically. The fact that they are the same person, like the guys in the back of the car looking at each other like, what the hell is going on? Or the fact that Marla and Tyler kind of, switch off, like he switches off interacting between the two of them. It reminds him of like his parents, or when the narrator and Tyler are comparing like their childhoods, like, oh, that sounds familiar. Things like that it really does hold together. And I think that to me is what really separates a genius plot twist to something that just feels like pulling the rug out from under you at the 11th hour.
Well, like in one of the things that they said, or that Edward Norton's character as the narrator says whenever he's making copies or something, he says, if you wake up at a different time zone in a different city, could you wake up as a different person? Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh my God, that totally makes sense now.
I think the film also has it's kind of ballsy in that it doesn't hold back that twist until like 2 minutes before the end of the movie. There's like a good 20 something minutes before the film ends where he figures it out, and he's like, wait a minute, stitching things together, trying to usurp Tyler's position and running the Fight Club and Project Mayhem and trying to stop his plans. And so it's really, he has this big battle with himself towards the end of the movie that made me totally made me think of something like Liar Liar, where he's kicking his ass. I'm kicking my ass.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love that visual and that way of exploring the kind of inner conflict between us all, where we're like, well, where am I? Who am I? What am I doing? And then trying to figure that out and just having that play out in such a cinematic way.
Absolutely. You just hit the nail on all the heads.
All the nails and all the heads.
All the nails on all the heads.
The entrance point for this film I always find really interesting too, because not only does it get into specifically calling out IKEA and my beloved Starbucks, and like the callous soul-sucking job that he has and things like that, but also the fact that he starts out being addicted to support groups, which I always thought was like, that's a random place to start a movie like this.
You know what? It may be random, but I now understand it.
Right.
And the reason, to give you a little bit of background, that my dad committed suicide. And after he did, one of the first things I did is I went to a support group. And, you become enveloped in this group of people that you don't know, who actually give a damn about every word that's coming out of your mouth. And I completely understand how a person could get addicted to that kind of atmosphere. So I completely get it.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just not something that you would think of. Like it's a really fresh place to start a movie. Like, not only is he going to a support group, because every time you see a movie and someone's going to a support group, it's like, oh, like, I have alcohol, I'm an alcoholic, or I have a drug problem or whatever. And this guy's like, yeah, no, I don't have problems. I just like to show up and have someone actually be legitimately compassionate towards me in my life, and just to feel something, basically. And that really establishes right out of the gate how kind of dead he is inside, that he just goes to these things to feel things, to have some kind of connection.
Well, and it also shows his anxiety and depression, because they say that when a person is in that state, they are trying to do everything that they can to feel alive. And no wonder he starts a fight club where he wants to be beaten up, because at least if you're being beaten up, you feel something. Mm-hmm. And so it makes complete sense that he not only is fighting, but also burns himself with nitroglycerin lye
Right.
In the movie. He talks about tumors and cancer and how he almost wishes he could die because he's so bored with life that he just wants to feel alive finally.
Right. Yeah.
And isn't it interesting that at the end, he has to all but kill himself just to feel alive?
He has the ultimate near-life experience towards at the end of the film when he puts that gun in his mouth. And it's also a strange, and everything about this movie is strange, but it's also a strange way that it starts out this kind of bizarre love story with him and Helena Bonham Carter.
If I had a tumor, I'd name it Marla.
Because she's obviously at a very similar place in that she's just kind of skating by, barely surviving, wearing thrift store dresses that she got for $1, and like living kind of like basically going to these things to hear people talk and getting free coffee and just kind of existing kind of passively in this world. And so it's, in a way, it's almost kind of strangely sweet that they connect in this way. You know what I mean? Because they both obviously need someone, and they say there's someone out there for everyone. So, I mean, these two happen to meet in this context. And in that way, it's almost like Tyler is just this obstacle standing in the way of the two of them really kind of understanding each other, because I think his purely sexual relationship with her, when clearly with her and Tyler, and then the narrator starts to develop actual caring about her as the story goes on a little bit more. I think that's just another way for him to feel alive without any consequences. They get together, they have this crazy sex, and then they're like, okay, he pushes her away, and it's an interesting dynamic to almost kind of try and look at this movie as a romance in a way.
Yes, it's two broken people coming together, two broken puzzle pieces coming together to become an image.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You were talking about how she's broken as well, because some of the things that comes out of her mouth during the movie, you're just like, what the hell did she just say? Like, whenever she's talking about, one of my favorite quotes of hers in the entire movie is when she says, the condom is the glass slipper of our generation. You slip one on and dance all night, and then you throw it away.
Well, there's also the obvious, I haven't been fucked like that since grade school, that she says. And there's so many, everything in that, like, I could see, I can understand watching this now, both why people in 1999 were like, what the hell is this? I'm gonna go see The Phantom Menace or Toy Story 2 or whatever other movie was out then. And yet why it's become such a cult classic, because it does have such a kind of punk rock energy to it that it makes sense that people that feel this way, or people that are like, would come to appreciate it over time, because the script is really different and fresh and distinctive in the way that something like Pulp Fiction was, and why that has endured in this kind of a similar fashion.
I bet you one of the reasons it bombed so badly at the box office is because people were too embarrassed to be honest that they wanted to go see it. I think the reason it's become a cult classic after the fact is because that's when people were finally allowed to embrace it in the privacy of their own homes, that they really genuinely loved it.
Yeah. And it's also probably a hard movie for the studio to sell, because is this a comedy? Is this a thriller? What is this? You know what I mean?
Is this a love story?
Exactly. So
how do you market something with that many plots and twists and turns?
Right. And it's based on a successful novel and everything, but it's not, it's not name recognition in the way that, well, now Marvel is everything, and Star Wars, or, there's no big, and that's the other thing. I guess Brad Pitt was kind of a big star at this point, but this is also a really strange performance for him. And then I want to say one other thing, then we'll get to the performances, but it's also too, how is this movie supposed to get word of mouth? People are not supposed to talk about it. They mentioned that throughout the whole film.
And yet we're doing it right now.
I know, we're breaking the rules. They're going to come after us.
We're totally breaking the rules. No, it just means we have to fight.
That's true. That's true. This is our first time at Fight Club, so we have to fight.
We have to fight.
I
All right,
forget.
so what do you want to fight about?
I always forget that there are like 8 rules that he goes into. He's like, if someone says stop, the fight is over, and it's like there's a whole spiel that he does. I always feel like just that's the first 2 that stick in people's minds. But yeah, there are 8 rules to Fight Club, and I always forget that.
I have them written down.
I had them written down too. I had them down. Do you want to go ahead? Let's run through them.
Okay, the first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. Third rule of Fight Club, someone yells stop, goes limp, taps out, the fight is over. Fourth rule, only 2 guys to a fight. Fifth rule, 1 fight at a time, fellas. Sixth rule, no shirts, no shoes. Seventh rule, fights will go on as long as they have to. And the 8th and final rule, if this is your first night at Fight Club, you have to fight.
I mean, if you're going to set up an underground Fight Club, at least he has parameters.
Do you know that they actually have set up underground Fight Clubs now? They actually exist throughout the United States?
Did they not before this movie? I mean, if they,
I'm sure they did, but
now not to the same extent. Now it's franchised out
nearly
all
to
over
the same
country.
extent.
And that's the thing too. You see that throughout the course of the movie. It's kind of subtle because it happens mostly in the background, little by little by little. We're so focused in on the narrator and Marla and Tyler, but it's like everywhere he goes, like people are recognizing him, or they're talking about, oh, there's a Fight Club in Miami, to the point that when he realizes that he and Tyler are the same person and he tries to stop him, even the cops are like, yeah, you said you'd say that. You said that if anybody tried to stop you, even you, that we should kick your balls, basically. And it's insane how it tracks the underground movement that is Fight Club, and the way that it expands from, just some crazy white guys that want to punch each other because they got all this pent up aggression, to kind of an anarchist group that's just like vandalism and things like that, to basically a terrorist network by the end of the film.
Absolutely.
So going into this movie, Edward Norton, Brad Pitt, Helena Bonham Carter, all Oscar nominees, yet Jared Leto, who I always forget is in this movie, is the one that has an Oscar. What's up with that, first of all? And what role do you think this movie played in the three main stars' careers? Because I feel like this is the movie that probably cemented their respective places in pop culture. Edward Norton being, one of the brightest, the best actors of his generation at that point. And I know since he's kind of faded off a little bit more because he's supposedly difficult to work with, things like that. And I feel like this is the movie that really said, oh my goodness, Brad Pitt is actually like a good actor, and like, not only is he like super buff and like sexy in this movie, but also this really opened up him playing a lot more character roles rather than just being the handsome leading man, like letting himself get dirty and letting himself get kind of grungy. So can you speak to that a little? And what do you think of that?
I think I can't help but feel like, this movie for them was the same thing of a stick it to the man, like here I am in Hollywood trying to show I'm important, I matter. And then I read this script that is so different from anything else I've ever done. Of course, I'm going to jump in and see if I can even have the mental capacity to embrace these crazy characters. I mean, I think it's just a brilliant, education for themselves as actors. I think it's a brilliant idea because, like you said, Brad Pitt was known as the pretty boy, and now he's showing himself getting dirty. How brilliant is that to show someone I am willing to do anything you want me to, give me a script, and I will just act the hell out of it.
It's a really smart, a movie like this that is this bizarre and this kind of combination of genres and things like that. It only is as good as its cast, and the fact that Edward Norton is in this film and plays kind of a regular guy in kind of a regular guy job, and he's believable as he looks like a regular guy. Like, he's not super built, he's not super statuesque or handsome like Brad Pitt, and like you said, Brad Pitt putting him in this role is completely unlike, what is it, Meet Joe Black or Legends of the Fall or even Seven,
or even Ocean's 11.
Yeah, well that was a couple years after this, but yeah, that movie.
Well, I know it was far after it, but still, it's just it further speaks to the fact that this is not something that is normal for him to take as a role, and I think that just shows hey, I am more than just a pretty face. Right. Let me show you what I can really do when you give me the right script.
Right. And it's the same kind of thing that I think someone like Johnny Depp struggled with in the 90s, where he was 21 Jump Street. And so he's like, no, I want to play Edward Scissorhands. I want to play Ed Wood. I want to play. And those are the movies where he's really made the best impression, are playing these really oddball, like bizarro characters. So in that sense, it counterpoints nicely with Brad Pitt's image. But then Helena Bonham Carter, I kind of feel like this is almost how she is. Is that weird? Because she plays a lot of these kinds of roles. She looks like the corpse bride in this movie.
Character.
Yeah, it would make sense why she was with Tim Burton for so long. She looks like the corpse bride in this movie, which she did the voice of. So it's weird seeing her,
especially in that thrift store bridesmaid's dress.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, somebody treasured this for a day. And now here I am, just living my life in this $1 dress. But yeah, I think Brad Pitt. Do you feel like this is his finest hour in a way, or do you agree that this is the movie that established him as like a legit character actor and not just a pretty boy?
I think if nothing else, it just made me respect him more as a performer. But do I feel like it set him up to be better? Not really. Because, I loved him in Seven.
Right.
Like, come on. Like, grant you that was nowhere near as dark as this film is, but, it still was different.
I would argue it's similarly dark, but not as strange as this. Let's go that way. That's
there
movie.
You go.
Because that
Fair
movie
enough.
had that one has a lot of like really kind of graphic images. I'm thinking specifically in this one of Meatloaf's brains basically falling out.
Yeah, that's kind of gross.
Jared Leto, who I forgot. I remember him I remember him being in this movie, kind of, but I forgot that he gets beat up like crazy, and then it's kind of all like two-faced the next time we see him, all like kind of deformed.
I forgot how pretty he was.
Yeah.
He was a pretty boy.
Not anymore. Tyler,
Not anymore. Not anymore.
The
Project
narrator
Mayhem totally took that from him.
Yeah, he felt like destroying something beautiful, which is another great line. And then this is one of those films where every line is kind of a great line. So it's funny to see that happening in this film, and just the way that I don't know, just the way that it captures so many of these themes about consumerism and just striking back, and does it in kind of a disturbing but also somehow kind of playful way, where the movie is in a way not necessarily taking itself so seriously, and that makes it, I think that really makes it really a lot more accessible, rather than if it was just taking itself super seriously and didn't have this undercurrent of dark comedy, and didn't have a lot of these meta touches to it, where Tyler and the narrator are breaking the fourth wall and like talking directly to the audience and explaining things, and the narrator's talking to us about something, and Tyler's like, oh, tell him about the what is it, the cream of wheat or whatever, and he's like, you got the picture or whatever, things like that, where Tyler looks at the camera and the film that we're watching the movie on kind of like shifts for a second, like glitches, things like that. How instrumental do you feel that those little touches of kind of letting the movie comment on itself a little bit and have a little fun with the bizarreness and wackiness of its premise, how much do you feel that's integral to the way that the movie works?
I think it's incredibly important because it keeps it from being a horror story. It keeps it from being you're against the bad guy who's about to blow up all this stuff. Instead, you're rooting for him. You want him to win. You want him to feel better about himself. You want him to come out on top. And I think it's absolutely necessary that you add these tones of comedy so that you don't feel so bad as everything is playing out.
The linchpin in that why the movie, as we mentioned earlier, works as a litmus test, because you mentioned you see early in the film, or I guess midway through the film, when Project Mayhem is really starting to kick off, that there's like government officials or whatever, and they're putting together like, this like task force or initiative to stop all the vandalism in the city, and they very purposefully, I think, in the screenplay sense. They call it Project Hope. And I think the movie is constantly trying to find that balance between hope and mayhem, and having it, depending on, as you mentioned, depending on where you're coming from, what mood you're in, you fall on one of those two extremes, or somewhere in the middle. But at least you gain a new perspective into both sides, and can kind of maybe walk out of the movie feeling a little more self-aware about your life. That's one of the big things I noticed from Tyler, is that he is super self-aware and pointing out the way that things work and the seams within our world. I mean, that's how he bonds with the narrator in his first scene, is that he's commenting, he's like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" He's like, "Oh, why? So you could pretend like you care?" Like things like that. And he like cuts through the bullshit. And that's part of what I think what makes that character so interesting.
Yeah, it's a very in your face, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's the person that is going to tell you exactly like it is. And I think we all have that within ourselves, that we're telling ourselves the way that it is, but then we let the self-doubt creep in, and we let the fear of what others are going to think creep in. And so it makes complete sense to me that someone who has been following the rules all of their lives, they're going to create this persona to be able to do everything that they've ever wanted to do. They're, like they were saying, we're sizing people up as we're walking around and looking at them, and after they've been fighting for a while, it changes their perspective on everything, and that's what we all want. We all want to be able to be confident enough to act like our true selves, but sometimes we have no choice but to put on a fake face in front of someone else just to be able to get through it.
It's to me the difference between the super ego and the id. Everybody has those three sides of their personality, and Edward Norton's character is obviously like, wow, okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Edward Norton's character is like, well, this is what I have to do. I have to go to work. I have to deal with my job and my stupid boss and blah, blah, blah. And Tyler's like, no, fuck that. This is what we're going to do. We're going to go build soap. We're going to go destroy buildings. We're going to piss in food. Did they even mention at one point, Edward Norton, the narrator, mentions at one point that I guess Tyler is dealing with a class action lawsuit from within his catering company for the urine content in their food or whatever, which I think is kind of a funny line. So it's just basically about him finding, and like I mentioned earlier, finding himself. It's the conflict within himself, and trying to find a way for those two sides of his personality to coexist without like losing himself to baser instincts.
Yes. And one of the things that I really liked in the beginning of the film is, the character that plays the narrator, Edward Norton, he's talking about how his home has blown up, and because that's obviously one of the first scenes that we see, is that his apartment with all that fancy stuff that he worked so hard to get has blown up. And so after he meets Tyler Durden, he goes and takes him out for a beer, and he's like telling him about how hard it was to watch all this stuff go up in flames, and he's just so depressed about it. And Tyler looks at him and very matter of factly says, "It could be worse. A woman could cut off your penis while you're sleeping and toss it out the window of a moving car." And it's just like those kinds of statements that he makes throughout the film. It's like, it's more of the in your face, like, look at it as it really is. Don't give me the bull answer. Don't give me my your act. Tell me how you're really feeling. And if you don't have the guts to just tell me like it really is, then quit talking.
Right. I mean, every minute, this is your life. I'm going to restate it. This is your life. And it's, you're basically, I'm going to paraphrase it now because I don't have that up anymore. And it's passing you by minute by minute, basically. So it's like, why waste time on bullshit? Just live your life, be your authentic self, which is obviously not always possible in order to live in the society that we've created for ourselves. But ideally, that's what you want to feel like you're doing, kind of generally in life. So it makes sense for him to feel like the only way he can do that is by losing all hope is freedom, they say in the movie at one point. So he literally, basically brings himself to the brink of death. Like, as you pointed out, so blatantly at the end of the movie by putting the gun in his mouth and like shooting out the side of his face, basically. What did you think of that moment when that happened? And like, it's like, I was watching and finishing that earlier today, and Kai walked by and she's like, oh, this movie's so fucking weird, basically. And I was like, yeah, basically. That thing is, even when I didn't remember the details of this movie that much, that image is burned into your memory if you've seen this film. So what did you think about the way that goes, and that he has to basically kill himself to be reborn?
Honestly, every time I see that scene, I cannot stop thinking about the quote that he says, "It's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything." And it totally goes back to the very beginning of the film. He blows up his house. He blows up everything he's ever known. And now he's free to do whatever he wants. He can finally be whatever he wants to be. And he doesn't know what that is yet. But at least now he's got the scale back to zero. He can finally figure out who the hell he is.
And the way that the movie doles out that information, the way that, they establish early in the movie where he's saying, oh, you could blow up anything with enough soap, and that he's getting the calls from the cops about like, oh, I think somebody, may have blown up your condo on purpose. You have any enemies? It's like, enemies. And that Tyler's off to the side, like feeding him what to say. And it's like, just tell them you did it. That's what they want to hear. Like there's all these, they seed from the very beginning the fact that he did it himself, but he's just not ready to face that, I guess. He's not ready to face the consequences of what he's become or what he's becoming or who he really is inside.
I mean, would you want to be admitting you blew up your stuff? So yeah, of course not. Of course he's gonna have to.
But to himself, I mean, not to the cop. I mean, just to himself.
But that's anytime we do something wrong, that's exactly what we do. They just put a face on it. They just showed it to us. They just made us look at it as two different people, even though it's the same person.
And the voiceover, I think, in this movie is, again, such an important element as well. We've seen unreliable narrators a million times in films and in other storytelling, but here it's voiceover is so often kind of labeled lazy screenwriting. It's just like an easy way to take an audience through a film. But I feel like in this film, it really works because he's talking to us in the same way that he's talking to himself, as we find out later in the movie, where we see all the shots of him interacting with, quotes, Tyler, while he's sitting there like, oh, we should do this again sometime, dropping the beer on the floor or beating himself up. And you see those guys come out of the bar and be like, what the hell? Where the camera obviously earlier in the film just cut away. And it really involves us in the film, in his story, so that we feel the impact of that reveal as he does,
Yes, absolutely. So that instead of it feeling like it's a documentary, we feel like we were part of his journey.
Exactly. And I think that draws the parallels to the fact that most of the people watching this movie are going to go home from the theater in 1999, go to sleep, wake up and go to their shitty jobs the next morning and be like, is this really all I'm meant to be? Is like just a cog in the system? Or should I just start my own underground fight club and strike back at the man? Which, again, I should point out to listeners, we're not advocating for that. But that
yes, and disclaimer, do not blow up your apartment.
No.
Do not be part of Project Mayhem.
But that sentiment is obviously something that resonates with people. That's why we're talking about this movie 20 years later. And I think even Tyler's plan, for the most part, I mean, Meatloaf, unfortunately, does not do very well throughout the course of the movie. But for the most part, he makes a very clear point of saying, we're not killing anybody. Those buildings are empty, blah, blah, blah. It's just about taking down the system, not about committing mass murder. And I think that's a very clear distinction, because if they were, granted, they're still terrorists, but if they were just mass murderers, just killing people left and right, it would be a lot harder for us to empathize with that sentiment as much as we would relate to it. I think it makes it that much clearer that it's really about the institution that's binding all of us.
Absolutely. And if it had been a mass murder movie, then it would definitely have a different dynamic.
Exactly. But it could easily have been that. That's kind of the what I think about this movie that's so interesting, why it's such a dark. I mean, this is a movie where the main character makes soap from human fat that he steals from liposuction clinics. So, I mean, clearly this film has no problems just going dark and going strange with everything, basically.
Yeah. Well, I like one of the the quotes that Brad Pitt says in the movie. He says, little by little, you're letting yourself become Tyler Durden. And it's like, is there a little Tyler Durden in all of us?
Yeah. I think for
just
a lot
like
of
there's
people
a little
there
Slim
is.
Shady in all of us. Go back to the 90s. What?
Will the real Slim Shady please stand up?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the truth. Everybody has that one little part of them where, they go to work and their boss is like, hey, do you have those reports? And they're like, yeah, here they are. I don't care. But you need to either find a way to, granted, I don't know. I guess there's a minority of people that are happy in their corporate jobs. I don't know. I'm obviously not built that way. I don't think a lot of people are. But you either need to find a way to change your situation or to find that fulfillment elsewhere. And that's where the movies start. I mean, that's part of the reason, honestly, that's part of the reason that I started this podcast, or at least refocused it, is this is a creative outlet for me. In my day job and my freelance writing and things like that, I don't get the same level of control. I don't get to talk about movies. I don't get the same creative expression. So for him in this movie, if there's a short period early on where he's able to cope with his shitty corporate job, because he has Fight Club to look forward to. He has that outlet to escape and to feel like he's actually a part of something, leading something rather than just being, as you mentioned earlier, a sheep.
Because don't we all want to feel like we matter? Like we're all part of something bigger than us, right? That matters more than just our crappy jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of why this movie is so interesting, is that it's all about that awakening. And for hopefully most of us, that won't be homegrown terrorism, but it's films like this and Matrix and The Matrix and American Beauty and things like that. Like people want Office Space. They want to live, which is weird. I want to see if I can find or do some kind of an essay or cover that a little more deeply, because there's something about 1999 where the cultural zeitgeist at that moment was just about
the man.
Yeah, about the man, about turning again. But I mean, it's been like that before. But those are huge movies. I mean, that not some of them weren't as huge at the time, that have come to be considered some of the best movies of the last couple decades. And I think that there's something to be said for where we were as a society then, and where what that says about the universal experience of everyone kind of dealing with the world and dealing with life and dealing with adulthood and seeing the dreams that they had forged as children not play out and kind of dissipate over the years. And maybe this movie for some people inspires action. Maybe you see this, you're like, you know what? My job does suck. I should go and work that novel, or go become a freelance writer, or, go pursue my career of being a musician, or whatever it might be, whatever their creativity and whatever wherever their passion draws them. And for most people, that's not a corporate job. So I think that's an interesting point that this film makes, and it's really, honestly, it's really the kind of major takeaway for this film, is that do you think David Fincher and the team behind this, do you think they were hoping to inspire people to action a little bit and have this film basically be a transformative experience in a way?
I think the best quote to sum up what they might have thought was, I am Jack's smirking revenge. Like, this is my answer to all the crap that you have piled on me. And now I'm just going to tell you like it is. I'm going to put it so in your face, you can't deny it.
It's a really interesting, I still don't know if it's necessarily like my favorite David Fincher film or anything, because it feels slightly, I mean, I just talked about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is one of my favorite movies, and that's obviously a much brighter, sunnier movie than this is. But
is it? Are you sure?
It is kind of dark in places too. But this movie has just an underlying nihilism to it that makes it I find it entertaining and fascinating to talk about and things like that, but it's hard. I feel like I always want to keep it slightly at a distance, just because it is so. Maybe the reason that I feel that way is because it is so true that it's like, oh, I'd rather go see Avengers Endgame or something again, because this is like hardcore. Like, I don't want to have to face that in a way, and it's telling that the movie itself is as in your face as Tyler Durden is. How do you feel? Clearly you don't feel the same way, that the movie is like sort of off-putting in a way. So okay, what am I missing here?
Maybe you're just not ready to embrace your true Tyler Durden.
Maybe that's true.
Maybe that's what's really going on here. But it's funny. I was just sitting here thinking about the fact that they make soap, and isn't it interesting that they're making soap, something that cleans, but yet something that can also be so destructive? Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the way it is with a lot of things. It can either be something really positive or it can be something really negative. It all depends on how you use it. And that's kind of how I feel about this.
Yeah, it is really a microcosm for the film, actually, in a way that you mentioned that. And I also think it's a little bit ironic in a way that Tyler's side business, basically, or his main business, I guess, over the course of the movie, is kind of making artisan soap in a way that, like, I granted Starbucks is a corporate thing, but in a way that people go out and get their grande latte enema that he mentions early in the movie, which is funny to me because, like, I just had a latte like today. Oops. It makes you feel like part of the system.
Bile duct.
Yeah, exactly. God. So it's kind of funny that he's like a small business owner trying to sell his like artisan created soap, but bucking the system. And then this is the other reason it made me think of Sweeney Todd, in addition to the obvious Helena Bonham Carter connection, that he mentions in here that, we're taking like the fat rich people, taking their waste, basically, like they're having the fat sucked from their bodies, and we're just kind of recycling it and selling it back to them. In the way that in that movie, the whole metaphor there is with the meat pies, that she basically take the people that around them that suck and they kill them and they make them into meat pies and then feed them to the other people. It's kind of this like grotesque circle of life kind of thing, I guess, in a way.
All right, where's the monkey holding Simba? Space monkey. Oh, that's one of the quotes.
Did say space monkey. That's true.
Well, there are so many good quotes in it, but hands down, my favorite quote in the entire movie that I quote every single chance I get is "The things you own end up owning you."
Yeah.
That is my favorite quote, and I will stand by that for like ever, because I mean, I have said that way too many times. Like, seriously, a lot of people that know me are probably shaking their heads like, yeah, she says that way too often. And every time I'm trying to like get the energy to clean out my apartment, because come on, let's face it, we all collect clutter, even though we swear we won't. That's the stuff I'm saying to myself as I'm trying to put it in the boxes and get it away.
Well, that's something just in our lives that we've really adopted a lot. This Kai and I, like when we have, even now with birthdays and Christmases and things like that, we're just like, we'd rather have experiences. Like, get me concert tickets, get me, take me to this cool place, or like, let's go on a trip or whatever, rather than, hey, here's a bunch of stuff that you could put in your house. It's like, okay, we have enough of that crap. We're actually in the process of also trying to get rid of a bunch of things anyway. And the fact that we have a little girl who collects toys and clothes and all this other stuff is just like, oh man, what are we supposed to do with all this shit? It's a real like, I really get behind the anti-materialism of this movie in a big way. And that's a good motto to have in a lot of ways. It's just, so many parts of our society just feel like they're pressuring you to collect things because that's gonna fill the emptiness inside. I mean, in the movie, that's what he's doing at the very beginning of the film. He's literally buying the entire IKEA catalog, basically.
Yes.
Which IKEA is the perfect target.
And he's got to have everything clever.
Yes, exactly. He like, as if he's buying into, or he's lying to himself that, oh, okay, this will fix it. This will help me.
Well, it's like whenever he says, you tell yourself, if I get that sofa, at least I got that sofa thing figured out, or,
exactly.
He was getting a wardrobe that was finally becoming really respectable, and now it's all gone. It's like, so what? At least you're alive. At least you are surviving. And that's what's more important than any of the crap you could have acquired over these last several years.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, here's an interesting question, though, that everybody, I think, in general has a problem with buying too much crap, which we don't need. Because honestly, when you boil it down to its basics, the bare necessities, there is not a whole lot of stuff that you really need in your house. Like a little bit of furniture, somewhere to sit, somewhere to sleep, food to eat, clothes to wear. But, we all take it to the nth degree. However, I feel like everybody still has their purchasing vice, their consumer vice, that they're like, okay, well, I have to get this. For me, being a movie person, obviously I have a movie podcast. It's Blu-rays, so I will buy DVDs and Blu-rays like mad. I will just go to the used DVD used record store down the street here, and I'll spend $20 on movies that I've seen before that I'll have in a room on a shelf. Maybe watch eventually. I mean, I just said at the top of the show that I had Fight Club on Blu-ray that was sitting there for I don't know how many years, 5 years, 7 years, who knows, sitting there unopened that I had no urge to open it necessarily because I had hundreds of other movies. Do you have a specific vice when it comes to purchasing things that you're like, oh, I really shouldn't get any more of these items. I have enough of this, but yeah, I'm going to do it anyway.
Craft supplies.
Okay.
That, they say glitter is the herpes of crafting, and so that's mine. Craft supplies, because I convinced myself that I'm going to make beautiful things, and so I buy all the supplies, and then I don't make anything. And it's so interesting because I actually just saw something on Pinterest the other day. It said there is a very distinct difference between buying the craft supplies and making the crafts. Those are two different hobbies.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, thanks for airing my dirty laundry right there. Appreciate that.
And I think everybody has those things, whether it's craft supplies or Blu-rays or books or shoes. Or I guess fedoras for me is a little bit. I only have one head, but I have I only had one head to put hats on, but I have maybe 6, 8, something like that. I probably wear 2 or 3 of them on a regular basis. So I haven't let that get too out of control yet. But I think that
I knew a woman that had 27 pairs of black shoes, but they were all different styles. So I think you're all right.
Yeah, that's too many. That's too many pairs of shoes. Especially, it's not even that many pairs of 27 pairs of shoes to me is already a lot, but 27 pairs of the same color shoes is just okay.
They were all black. They were all black shoes. Different dress shoes, strappy ones, flip flops, all the things.
Jeez. At least we're being self-aware of that. I think thanks to Fight Club and other experiences in our lives, the fact that we're owning up to this is all, I shouldn't have so much stuff, but I have this one giant, I don't know how many boxes of craft supplies you have in your house. I'm just giving you benefit.
I won't disclose that information, and I will not. I don't want that to be held against me in a court of law.
There you go. I think it's at least being aware of the system around you. However whatever you choose to do from that point on is up to you. But I think that this movie helps to really highlight that is the case, and empower people to feel like if they want to make changes to do that. One other question, and then we'll start kind of finishing up the show. Chuck Palahniuk actually did a sequel. In comic book form in 2015-16. Would you even want to see any kind of follow-up to this movie, or do you think he should just leave it alone? Would you be curious to find out what's going on with, I guess, the narrator, Tyler?
I do not want to know. I want to keep the beautiful story that I have in my head as to what happened after the buildings burned down. I want to keep that in my mind. They got married. They were happy. They had babies. They're fine. I don't want to think about what might have actually happened. Come on now. Although then again, if you ask me that question when I'm in a bad mood, I might be like, yeah, tell me they blew up more. It's actually interesting. Rewatching it a couple nights ago, one of the things that had happened in the film is, they blow up these buildings and then they're convinced that that's going to set the scales back to zero. And all I could think from we're in the age of technology era is, well, they probably have it backed up on servers. They just blew up those buildings for nothing.
How are you going to destroy the cloud?
Right, exactly. It's still in the cloud. What is it they said in that movie Sex Tape with Cameron Diaz and whatever his name is? He's like, once it's in the cloud, you can't get it back down from the cloud. Right,
exactly. Jeez. And then you get that great usage of, I think it's the Pixies, Where's My Mind There, which is an iconic now application of an existing song to a movie, and that image with the two of them holding hands, which is both kind of haunting but also kind of beautiful at the same time, ? I think it's a really bittersweet note for the film to go on that serves both interpretations of the story, I think, too.
And a hashtag bad romance.
Yeah. Hashtag little monsters. Is there anything about Fight Club that we didn't talk about that you wanted to make sure we mentioned?
Well, I mean, we've already broken all the rules
That's
of
true.
talking about it.
That's true.
So, what is it he says? I still can't think of anything.
Nice. Good. I like that, I feel like you mentioned that about what your favorite quote from the film is, but I like that you basically mentioned, I don't know, 7 or 8 of them throughout the course of this episode. It's just a testament to how good the script is that we keep just being like, oh, it's like they say in the movie, blah, 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 blah,
Yes,
blah. So,
absolutely. Because, I mean, there are so many good quotes in the movie. And if you didn't catch a good quote, then you didn't get the movie.
Right. Ashley, famous Ashley Grant, it was great having you back on the show. Can you tell people a little bit about where they can find you on social media?
Everybody can find me at famousashleygrant.com, and I am also on Instagram at famousashleygrant.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that we got to break both of the first 2 rules of Fight Club for, roughly over an hour and change here. So thank you so much again for coming on. And we'll definitely, I feel like now we have, because Kai mentioned that we talked about Fight Club in the last episode, I feel like now we're pressured to seed what our next collaboration will be down the line. But nothing's coming to my mind. If
I still can't think of anything.
Yeah. Nice callback. I can't think of a better way to
flashback humor.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's set up and payoff. That's exactly what that is. So you're planting the seeds of the big plot twist that will come in the next episode.
I almost feel like because of the fact I mentioned 7 at least twice that we have to talk about 7 next time. But we'll figure it out.
Yeah, that would be a good follow up to this Brad Pitt, David Fincher joint, I guess. So yeah,
because we haven't sinned enough right now.
Exactly. Nice. There you go. Well, we've sinned by talking about Fight Club. There you go.
Yes, we broke the cardinal rule.
And we'll leave it there for the next time. Thank you so much, Ashley. This has been fun.
Thank you.
Bye.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CROOKED